All right, well, officially good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Katie Schauer, and I will be your host for this morning or this afternoon's presentation. You've joined us for our next edition of our Experts on Tap webinar series, and you will be hearing from Jason Paquette and our expert, Chris Self, today. Before we begin, I would just like to remind you that we do have all lines muted, and that if you have any questions during the time of the presentation, please feel free to utilize the Q&A or chat boxes, and we'll be happy to answer those at the end of the session. We are recording today's WebEx, and we will be posting that to our website later this week. We'll also be sending out a follow-up email with that link so that you can share it with colleagues or review it at your leisure. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Jason Paquette.
Thanks, Katie. As Katie said, my name is Jason Paquette. I'm the employee owner at InSource. As a 100% ESOP company, we commit to live by 4 unifying principles: contribute, serve, build, and care. This simply highlights that our employees care about each other. We are building a company that is designed to stand the test of time by selflessly serving our clients and contributing to the broader community of U.S. manufacturing. Our vision at InSource is to make those manufacturers and industrial companies more productive and profitable, ultimately revitalizing manufacturing in America. We've helped thousands of clients so far, and we're well on our way to deliver over 1 billion in transformational results for our clients through digitization. We don't do this alone. InSource is an AVEVA Select partner, one of only 8 in the country. We love the cutting-edge technology of our partners, but our secret sauce is that we recognize that technology alone is not enough. So we help companies truly integrate technology into their processes and routines, and then support them for the long haul. We call it the InSource way, and time again, we've seen it unlock the untapped potential in industrial plants and employees. Next slide. So we put this together, our Experts on Tap, and what it really is to dig a little deeper in some of the things that we see clients go through. And we try to, do that within a really short period of time of 30 minutes. A lot of times it should be longer. Like today, we're going to ask Chris, who is our expert on tap, our technical solutions architect, to do this in 30. I'm sure he wanted to do it in an hour, but we're trying to get it down to 30. So with that, we're learning about leveraging the AVEVA Insight application programming interface today. So Chris, I'm passing on to you.
Thank you, Jason. So Katie, are we good to go?
We can see your screen. You're good.
Okay, fantastic. So yes, we're trying to keep it short and sweet. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm with InSource, Technical Solutions Architect here for quite a few years now, and Jason knows me pretty well. He knows I'm going to have a tough time fitting all this in 30 minutes, but we're going to do our best. Today we're going to talk about the Insight Platform Application Programming Interface, or API, which is a pretty powerful piece that I think you guys are going to enjoy, and hopefully be able to get some use out of that over time. So just to kind of get started here, we're going to talk about the application API, the API for Insight. But first, we're just going to talk a little bit about APIs in general, give you guys a sense for what they are and how they're used, and just in case that you're not familiar with those at all. So just to kind of get started, these are the areas of improvement, areas in manufacturing and industry where InSource helps our customers in a lot of different ways. And here are some of the ways that we do that. And pretty much each one of those areas probably has some sort of a data store that's associated with it. And there are lots and lots of data stores that are typically in manufacturing and industrial environments. So, the idea here is to how do we make those more integrated? Your plant, your operation is a kind of a living, breathing organism, and you need to be able to oftentimes share data between these, what are often silos in the organization. So just to give a little bit more detail here, you've got these applications, which are typically 3-tier applications. Most of the time, you've got data, you've got logic, you've got a presentation layer, And very often these are purpose-built applications that have different data, but oftentimes you want to be able to share that data from one system to another. And that's done in a lot of different ways. We can't go into all those now, but let's say, for example, that the application on the left is an Oracle database and the application on the right is a SQL Server database, where you could say, okay, we're going to initiate a query, SQL query between those two, send a request, get a response. You could do that, but most of the time the owners of these applications really don't like that. They don't have as much control over what is exposed in either of the databases there and who can have access to what. So that's very often frowned upon, even though it's technically possible. You also may have external applications as well, guys. So there may be something that's outside your enterprise that you would want to have access data or send data back and forth as well. Lots of different scenarios there as well. So there's a lot of complexity to this integration, but APIs do make it much more simple. And that's one of the things that InSource tries to do is make the complex as simple as possible. So APIs increase access. It increases this secure access as well. It standardizes and allows the owner of the application to control what data is accessed. And you guys are using APIs all the time. You're using them, probably use an API today. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So one of the things we're going to do is, it's not only systems, but also it could be just people that need access to this, this data repository. We're going to talk about an example here using the Open Weather site. You guys might be familiar with Open Weather. So just to give you a little bit of a feel for how an API works, right? So so here we have a URL that we have issued an API call to this site here called Open Weather Map, and I'm going to zoom in here a little bit if I can, so you guys can see that a little bit better. And so essentially this API call here that you see here in this URL, the first part of it here is what we call the API endpoint. And the owner of the API is going to give this to you. And so that's sort of your starting point. And then typically you'll see a question mark, and then after that you're going to see some parameters, and the parameters tell the API call what information that you want to get. And so in this case there's a parameter here called Q, which basically indicates the city for the weather in this case that you want to get. And then parameters are separated by an ampersand, and then there's one more parameter here, okay, and that's called the app ID, and this provides authentication to this site. So in the case of Open Weather Map, you have to go register for that, and they'll give you this API key so that you can make API calls against it, so that not just everybody in the whole world can have access to this data. Okay, so when we specify the city that we want and we execute this, then we get data back, right? And so when we have a little bit closer look at this data that we're getting back here, okay, so I'm going to jump over here into a sort of drawing mode here. So we see we have data that's coming back to us, and we see the format of this data is what is called, typically most APIs return this data back into what's called JavaScript object notation, okay, otherwise known as JSON, okay. And so we see JSON comes in what are called name value pairs, right? So we see we have an ID, we have an ID here, and then we have an ID of 804, or we have the temperature here, and that's the name, and then the value is 290. One of the interesting things is this, it's pretty hot here in Atlanta, but it's not 290 degrees. They actually return that data back to you in degrees Kelvin, and you have to go and convert that to Celsius or to Fahrenheit, as you please in your application. So when you execute and run an API query, you're going to get data back. It's really all about data. Now, while we're on the subject of weather here, I wanted to go ahead and bring up another application that I want to show you here. Let's see. a little bit of a tough time with my, let's see, there we go, demo box 2. Okay, so we have an application that's called the OI, or Operations Integration Web Service. And so what this does is allows you to, when you have your Wonderware environment, most of you are probably using AVEVA products in the Wonderware environment. This allows you to take advantage of APIs that might be out there in the world that has data in them. Could be internal APIs, it could be external APIs. You want to bring that information into your Wonderware system, into your InTouch, your application server, and so forth. And so you see here, we're in the Operations Integration Server area. So there, you might be using Allen Bradley to talk to a PLC. Well, we use the web service to communicate to APIs. And so here's our Open Weather API, very similar to what you saw just a few minutes ago. And so what we can do is execute this API, and it will return information back to us into whatever application that you would like. And so something really simple here, guys, is I'm bringing this data back into application server, back into InTouch here. It's got a very basic interface here that we can use to then get data for weather from wherever we want, right? And so so for example, you know, here's a pretty cold city right here, probably the coldest in the world, they say, and so we can see we're already getting data for this Brada do Garcas, which is down in South America, pretty hot down there. Okay, so what we can do is we can change our city here and tell it to go get the temperature in Siberia here, which is, and it's pretty cold down there, so, or up there, I should say. So this is just an example of using an API, using the OI web server to access information in pretty much any API that you want to out there in the world, bring that information and integrate that data into your HMI applications, your data management systems on the plant floor. Okay, so just a interesting example of how to use that in applications that you guys are familiar with. So let's look at that's just sort of APIs in general. And so now let's talk about the online Insight API as well. So Insight, if you're not familiar with it, won't go into a lot of detail here. We do have other content that gives you a lot of information about what it is, but essentially it is an online historian plus a lot of other things. So it provides collection and storage of process data, visualization analytics, condition monitoring, event tracking, downtime tracking, OEE, predictive analysis. The list goes on and on. The list is growing daily. And so it has a lot of data stores there. So you can see there's a couple of database icons up here, but there's a lot of information that's stored here that you may want to bring out of the Insight API, out of Insight into your applications, whatever your applications might be. And so that's the mechanism that allows that to happen is the Insight REST API. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. Okay, so that's just a broad industry term for this type of functionality. So what can you do with the REST API? So first thing is you can actually generate charts with that. So you could say, bring me back the data for these tags and create this kind of chart. Maybe you're integrating with some sort of a SharePoint site or other sort of website where you want to embed this information there. So you could use the chart API for that. There is the ability to store data. So we can push data up, for example, via CSV into Insight. So the ingest part of that, maybe you have a laboratory information management system, you got lab data, you want to be able to see that lab data in association with your process history and so forth, so you could use this API to do that. You can also retrieve data. Okay, so ask for data for certain tags over a certain time period and receive that data back, and there's that JSON format that we talked about a little bit earlier. Now, you can also insert comments and attachments to the REST API, and then also other kinds of data that might be up there as well. So, for example, production tracking, where you want to see how much product have we made, what were our downtime reasons, OEE, all sorts of things like that. So, very comprehensive API here to enable you to manipulate and get the data that you're looking for. Now, how do we do that? Well, how do we execute APIs? Well, pretty much any application that can execute HTTP posts, gets, puts, etc., or leverage what's called the OData interface can execute calls against pretty much any API in the world, including the Insight API. So you can do that with a variety of applications. So keeping it in the family, in the AVEVA Wonderware space, so you can execute this with industrial graphics, application server, Edge, and even that web service OI server that I showed you just a few minutes ago, just to name a few. Now, you can also get into the custom side of things where you just want to execute Python or JavaScript or Ruby, whatever programming language that you would like to create a custom application and pull data out of this Insight API to do whatever it is that you would like. Other things like scripting engines, so like PowerShell, curl, and so forth. Maybe you're doing some things in the cloud. Maybe you're doing have a data repository in Azure or AWS or Google Cloud. You can then access that data. So lots of different things there. Even the competition, right? So you might be able to execute something from Rockwell or Siemens or Ignition to sort of integrate that, use the Insight system along with other systems that you might have made investments in overall. So many different ways, guys, of accessing this information. So if we have a look at the actual Insight interface here, so many of you may have seen this, maybe using it today. So this is kind of like square one, and this application that you're seeing here is using the API. So this web app is not executing SQL queries and so forth to get all this data. It's really just telling the API what information that it wants, and then it takes that data and then renders it here in the presentation layer to show you this particular trend here. So it's all really about the API when it comes to access, even with our built-in tools. Now, so we've got this data that's sitting here. So, there are other ways of pulling that, this data out. Maybe you want to do other things with that data, right? So here we have an API call here to Wonderware Online, and so you can see the URL here, and then we're specifying parameters that tell the system, okay, we want to get some process history for a certain set of tags over a certain time period at a certain resolution, and we're doing that here in the URL and specifying it with those parameters like we talked about a few minutes ago when we were looking at the weather API. Same concept, right? And so you can build this URL request here manually or based on user input, or programmatically building this URL string and then executing the HTTP GET to bring back this data, right? And so now you can see here that here's the data that came back. And so you can see these are kind of like rows in in an Excel spreadsheet. So we have, here's our tag name, here's our date time. This is our first row. So here's the value of this particular tag right here. And so here's the next one at a different timestamp. Here's the value for that same tag. Again, these APIs are about data, not necessarily about presentation. So you may want to, integrate data into another database, into another system, and eventually there may be some sort of presentation layer, a chart, a graph, a whatever, right? But as far as what you're seeing with an API by default, then really you're just seeing the data that is returned, and then you can do something with that a little bit later, right? And so another interesting tool, if you're going to get into using APIs or playing with them or testing them, is this application called Postman. So very easy application to use. You can see that we still have the URL with the parameters, but the cool thing about Postman is you can instead of trying to edit in line up here, which can sometimes get to be a pain, you can create your parameters here and then type in what the values are for those parameters in this nice interface, and then execute, and then the data that's returned to you comes back down here. Okay, and so you can test this to say, okay, am I getting the right data back? And then you can then move this over into whatever other application that you might be using and say, okay, I know that this URL request works, and so now you can go use that in your other application. But a really nice tool here. Another nice tool as well that kind of helps with this Sometimes us humans like to see things in sort of a tabular format, right? So we've got, let's see here, we've got this little thing called, this website called JSON2 table. So I can take my JSON result set, paste it in here, and I can see the data now in a tabular format, which makes more sense to us humans. The JSON format that you saw, the native, and machines and computers love that. It's very easy to iterate through that and get the data that you're looking for. We like to see things a little bit differently. So this is a good way to kind of visualize the data that's coming back to make sure that this is what you really need. Again, we're kind of in testing mode now, so you can take this URL and use it in your real application, and you can feel confident that your data is coming back to you in a way that you would like. So one other thing that I'd like to mention, guys, is let's take another scenario here, for example. Let's say that you've got two systems, right, and you want to be able to share data between them. Something that we often see is sort of a file drop kind of way to integrate those two. So one system will extract data, perhaps transform it, and we load that into another system. Then the intermediary there might be a CSV file, for example. You got, most of you probably worked with CSV files in the past, and so if we have that kind of scenario, and if you recall, I mentioned, you can do these, you can create these API calls with a lot of different things. What we're going to see now is just a simple one that's using Python here. So it's going to take you over to another image here, and see if we can get it to share here. And for some reason, it is not sharing. Hang on a sec. Okay, that's my other one. Excuse me, guys, while I manipulate this here a bit. Yeah, my application, for whatever reason, is not sharing right here, so I won't be able to show you the Python piece, but that's okay. So essentially what that did is, just a little bit of Python script runs and grabs the data out of the, through the Insight API, takes that JSON data and converts it to a CSV file, and then pushes that over to, you can then use that CSV file in whatever application that you would like. So, so those are basically, several of the examples that you can use to, again, whatever application or environment or programming environment that you're comfortable with, you can probably use some of the coding there to take advantage of the REST API. So I would say, guys, that, just from a getting started perspective, if you haven't used the online Insight piece, then I'd highly suggest that you let us help you get started with a free trial. We can do that for 45 days. You guys can push some data up, get kind of familiar with it, and see if it's something that you might like. And so we're more than glad to sort of help you move forward with that, and look at perhaps you're integrating with other systems, whatever it might be, via the API as well. So just wanted to sort of end there. This is pretty quick. 30 minutes or so. Time is almost past, but I did want to leave some time for questions. So, Katie, back to you.
Great. All right. You can hear me okay, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, good. I remembered to unmute myself. And we do have a question here. Let's see. Actually, there's a couple questions. Does the API work with both the online and on-site versions of Insight?
So this API is much different than what you get with the on-prem version. There are some capabilities around this, but not nearly as much on the on-prem, but not nearly as much as you have with the online or cloud-based Insight.
Okay. Is this documented somewhere?
Very much
So
so,
I assume,
yes.
yeah.
It is documented if you log into the Insight. So if you have a subscription, you can find the help there, or we can always send the link out to everyone as well. So that's a public documented system, so you can go in and see. There's lots of examples in there about how to do things with Postman, like I showed you earlier, how to do a lot of different things with it. You know, it's all very well documented, and you know, they did a really good job there. So absolutely.
Okay. That actually looks to be all of our questions at this point. So Chris, thank you so much for presenting this for us today. Like I said before, we're going to have this on our website probably by the end of the day tomorrow, and we'll send out an email with that link, and we'll include the link for the documentation too. I'll get that from you, Chris, and we'll put that in that email. If you guys have any more questions, or you want to see a demo, or you want some more information, feel free to contact us via our website, insource.solutions. We've got a contact us link right at the top of our page, or you can email us directly at communications@insourcess.com, and we will be happy to connect you with the right people to answer your questions. So thank you, Chris, for presenting this today for us, and we will see you guys next time.
My pleasure. Everyone have a great day. Bye.